our great creation story from Genesis. And if some of you have been in my Bible study, you know that we actually have two creation stories, but I prefer the first one over the second. Now, y'all know that my wife is a pastor. That's why you never get to see her or have her be a part of the church here. Well, a few years ago, when I was the pastor's husband and I was working in campus ministry, I got to go to her church and hear her every Sunday and be a part of that worship service. Well, she did a sermon series, I guess it's about maybe 9-10 years ago now. And she brought Play-Doh into the church, and yarn, and pieces of paper, and pens, and pencils, and cameras, and she told the people in the pews to go ahead and mess around during the sermon. You know, draw, doodle, create, do all these things. Well, and after about 4 weeks of doing this, she then said, well, what we're going to do is I want you all to draw a self-portrait, okay? Or to do some way of creativity, some creative art that you can do. And we're going to put it up in the hallways of our church, and we're going to have a gallery. So there was this one afternoon where we all gathered together. Now, only about half the congregation participated, about 50. A lot of the kids did it. A lot of the older folks did it. Some of the younger folks did it. And we hung all these creations on the walls of the church. And we had one of those kind of museum openings, right? We had grapes and cheese and crackers, and we took a look around for about an hour and a half at everybody else's creation. And the artists were able to stand next to their creations and explain what they had done. Isn't that a neat idea? Kind of reminds you of 3rd or 4th grade, right? When you go to your kid's school. Or if you've been an artist, your first gallery opening, I guess. Well, we had photographs. We had a guy who was a tiler. That was what he did professionally, was install tile in bathrooms all the time, and he had a mosaic. We had quilts and paintings and knitting and pen and ink drawings and even a musical composition. We had a musician who wrote a song to talk about himself. And so it was on a score. It was a beautiful sheet of paper. Now, many of these people had been sitting side by side in worship for many years, even decades. And they'd never really gotten to know the people next to them. And then we had 2 worship services. Kind of sounds like us, right? We have 3. And there were people who were encountering each other in their hallways who said, I didn't know you went to this church. Which was kind of odd, because they'd been going there for 20 or 30 years. But it was a way for them to gather together and to be creative and to demonstrate all that God had done in their own lives. Now, what I enjoyed seeing the most was the fact that our community of faith was energized and excited, and there was an act of creation in the midst of what was normally just seen as something you do on a Sunday morning, right? Now, I don't know if you had this experience, but when I was in 6th grade, I had an art teacher tell me that I would never be an artist. And that I did not have a creative bone in my body. Anybody have an art teacher or a music teacher telling you you can't sing, or an English teacher telling you that your writing is the worst ever? Yeah. You know how it made you feel? It made you feel like as if you could never accomplish something, right? And for 20 years, I struggled. Up until that point, I struggled with this idea that I did not have any creativity, that I could never be an artist. I'll tell you what. You know what I did? I took a big refrigerator box and I traced myself. And so my self-portrait was me having all my photographs of my life that I photocopied and I put into my person. And so it was kind of creepy because I put it up in the house and my wife thought it was me sometimes when she'd come in the dark in the night. She's like, what's this guy in the house? We had to throw that thing away when I moved. See, it was devastating. It was devastating for me to hear that I wasn't an artist, that I wasn't creative, that I was never going to be as good as whoever else was in that class. Now, it's true. I don't have the talent to draw a straight line. I mean, I need a ruler to draw a straight line. Maybe even not a ruler, but one of those rulers with the line in the middle, because sometimes even it goes off. I don't color in the lines, usually because I'm too impatient. Right? And maybe like that, you don't color the lines because you just want to get done with it. Yeah, that was me. But as I worked on that self-portrait for my contribution to the gallery, I felt like I was an artist, and people weren't going to judge my ability. In the midst of being able to create something, I was restored in my belief in myself again. Well, in the book of Genesis, we Hear this account of creation. God created humankind in his image. Male and female, he created them. And in Psalm 139, we hear these words, "For it was you who formed my inward parts. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works that I know very well." Have you ever wondered what it means to be created in the image of God? I like to think that we are a part of God's imagination. That God thought about us. That God breathed into us the breath of life. That God saw maybe just of how we are going to look in this world. God spoke us into being. Now, I know biology. I know that there are things that happen to have babies. But I like to believe that a part of being created in the image of God is that we also have this thing called the soul that is a part of us. That God gives to each one of us. You see, the truth is we are God's masterpieces. We are living, breathing, unique creatures of God, reflecting God's love to the world. Ted Runyon, in his book, A New Creation, writes that our calling as Christians is to reflect the image of God to others. Now, how many of you have been to a great art museum? Maybe you've been to one of the Smithsonian museums, or you've been to maybe the Louvre in Paris or something like that. And you know, it's great because all the pictures are there. But can you imagine just if someone hadn't gone through and put the pictures in each gallery, organized them by the age that they were done or the theme, how confusing that would be? Have you ever been to a museum where nothing is organized, right? You know, it's not very fun. And so the job of a museum curator is to design a space that allows the art to live in its fullness, right? In the same way, if you are a composer or a musician and you're performing a composer's body of work, what you're going to do is explain to the people why you're putting pieces of music together and where it came from. And maybe you do it thematically, or maybe you do it by, if you're doing a Mozart perspective, what you do is you put all the pieces of music together chronologically or something like that. And you see, we are like that museum curator, or we're like a person who is organizing a musical performance, because we demonstrate God's work to the rest of the world, and it's up to us to create that space where God can be revealed to others. Now, one thing I love about being a father of a 9-year-old and an 11-year-old is that they have so much creativity. Gabriel and I, we love to work on Legos, and he just builds some amazing things, and I just love being able to do that. And with Wesley, I got to tell you, he did this thing a few years ago, maybe about a year ago. He decided to make his own characters, so he drew this person, and he gave him attributes, like you would do for a card game or something like that. And so he photocopied them on my copying machine, made about 150 copies of the same guy, and had them have an amazing battle against each other in his room. And if I only known that about 10 years ago, all I had to get was a copy machine, I would have bought him all these toys. I still display my son's artwork in my office. I still accept my children's Lego creations as they were Michelangelo's statue of David. And that is a joy of being a parent, is being able to see that creativity in your children. And my goal as a father is to nurture their imagination and their passion as they make discoveries about themselves and as they continue to grow up, right? Now, a responsibility I also have is to let them learn from their mistakes. When I'm building a spaceship out of Lego with my son Gabe, it's very easy for me to take over the whole thing, right, Gabe? And I'll just make it for you. And I say, this is how you do it, right? But I've had to learn how to say, Gabe, why don't you use your creativity and use your imagination? And when the wings fall off, you'll know he has to put something new on it to keep the wings on, right? And so I have to allow him to make mistakes so that he can learn from those mistakes and grow. And when he gets comprehension of that, and when he gets it right, I just get to share in the joy that he brings. Now, I believe that God does the same for us. God gives us the gift of free will, allowing us to go through life, going in life and creating and imagining the world, exploring and discovering, experimenting and perfecting. I've been in ministry since I graduated from college in 1998. Nearly 20 years now. I can't believe that. I worked as a missionary for a couple of years, and then I went to seminary and I worked in campus ministry and I've been a pastor at 5 different churches and 2 different campus ministries. When I graduated from college, I took a journey across from Virginia Beach all the way to Espanola, New Mexico, about 2,000 miles. And I remember I had the Dixie Chicks playing the whole time. Remember the Dixie Chicks? Wide Open Spaces was the album that came out that year. I remember, thinking, I'm about to change the world as a missionary. I've been called to be a missionary. Well, in the nearly 20 years since I graduated college, the truth is we've seen violence and terrorism and war and greed. And now we're entering a time in our country where it seems like racism is coming back again. And people are hanging nooses at construction sites. And, well, it's a little depressing, isn't it? And if you're like me, when you get depressed, you like to eat too much. And you spend money on things that you don't have money for. And you watch a lot of TV just to escape from the reality of this world, right? Just think about how we were about 5 years ago after or 10 years, or maybe 7 years ago now, with the disruption of the economic market. A lot of us were really depressed, weren't we, as a country? Now, I don't think I'm the only one. In the past 20 years, obesity levels have risen astronomically. I think we're still hungover from that financial crisis. And now we're dealing with the presidency of a man who never served elected office before, was in the military, and so we're all learning with him what it's like to have somebody like that in office. And I think we are afraid to have hope. We are afraid to risk getting to know even ourselves. And as a nation, I think we are in a denial of reality and kind of in a funk. And I think sometimes we're so willing to live somebody else's life that we just love to watch reality TV as long as it takes us away from our own reality. And I've discovered that with the creativity that free will gives us, we also have the capacity to make bad decisions. Free will allows us to make decisions that tarnish the image of God. Like a dirty mirror, we can't reflect the image of God in the world. Like a painting that's all gunked up with centuries of dust, our beauty is hidden under the grime of disuse. And sometimes we get so screwed up that we get stuck in cycles of pain and despair. And sometimes we are convinced that we are not good, that we've messed up so badly that we can never be whole again. But God sees us for who we are. God takes that grime off of us. God cleans up our mirror so that we can shine and reflect to the world the joy of being His creation. In a land far away, in a church long ago, a letter was written to a church in turmoil. The rich wouldn't share with the poor. People were gossiping all the time. Theological arguments abounded. Sexual relationships caused problems and disagreements. And then even how people would talk about government and how it should be run threatened to destroy the church family. The founder of that church was far away, building new churches and sharing the gospel of Jesus Christ. But when Paul received these 2 letters from the church in Corinth, when he received a letter from the church in Corinth, he had to write that twice to them to get them straight. And he said, if anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. Everything old has passed away. Everything has become new. You see, God came into the world in the form of Jesus Christ so that we might know that nothing would separate us from God's great love. Jesus came to remind us that we are worthy of being called good. You have the opportunity to be a new creation. You have been created in the image of God. Male and female, you are created. God has knit you together. God knows you in all of your potential. No matter what you've done, no matter the ways that your decisions have tarnished the image of God, no matter your fears, no matter your doubts, no matter your depression, no matter the bruises and wounds that you've suffered, God loves you, and God sees you as a masterpiece. The most exciting thing I felt about wandering around my wife's church that day we had the gallery of our self-portraits was that there was no room to judge each other's work. It was the first time in my life I've been part of a community that saw the creations as being worthy of praise. No matter how old they were, or how young they were, no matter how good the painting was in whatever objective sense, because we all were there to learn about each other. And you know what? We all called it good. And I believe that God looks at our world, even in our frailty, even in the brokenness, even in the wrong-headed decisions we make, the evil we do. And God says to our world, it is good. I believe that God sees the best, hopes for the best, and cheers us on when we do the best. And so I encourage you to have hope. I encourage you to know that God is there like a good parent, allowing you to explore, challenge, and to come to your own conclusions. And I hope that you have hope that God is never that far away. But I also challenge you to be a new creation, renewing the image of God so that you might exhibit to the world the masterpiece that God has created. And so do more than just show the beauty of God, but tell others that they are God's masterpieces also. Amen.